Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for joining me for the last talk. I realise I'm competing with the free bar, so thank you for joining me. And thank you for B-Sides Cheltenham for putting me on. So this talk is a bit different to some of the usual ones I've done that tend to contain a lot of war stories and things, which are my favourite parts and good fun to talk about. But this talk, Red Team, the fear is very real. Is a little bit different. It's been born out of frustration, and I must caveat at this point that although these slides are branded Kinetic, which is the company I work for, these views are very much my own, just in case they sue me. So my name's James Mason. As I mentioned, I work for a company called Kinetic. We're a defence company, and with that, we help to protect national security. We were fully deployed throughout COVID. Our testers were on site as and where needed. And even so, we were closely working with our customers. We've got a handful that stopped red teaming during the pandemic and haven't felt the need to pick back up again, which is quite worrying conversations. So I've been physical pen testing, social engineering, red teaming, whatever it's called this week, for just over a decade. I've got a proud never been caught record, and I've managed to social engineer my way into some of the most sensitive environments that you can think of. I spoke at B-Sides Cheltenham last year, and it was a talk titled From Salesperson to Social Engineer, which is my own sort of journey of how I ended up somebody non-technical, delivering in a supremely technical industry. And then late last year, I became CSFL pen tester qualified with the cyber scheme. And in brackets, I've put only jest and at foundation level. So I still regard myself as a noob when it comes to technical skills. So, a little bit about Kinetic, I've mentioned already. A lot of people don't realise Kinetic are actually the oldest dedicated pen test team on the planet. Back when we were the MOD and you couldn't talk about offensive security, so it dates back then. We actually formed the check scheme and then handed it back over to CESG so it could retain its independence. And we were founding members of CREST, so I'm sure that, you know, all of you in the room are familiar with these types of schemes. And just to show you, there's our guys doing some OSINT. It proves how old we really are. So, yeah, my personal journey, as I say, I got a job with Kinetic back in 2013, had no idea that pen testing, ethical hacking was a thing. And I got my role as a salesperson, and on my second day with the company, a couple of pen testers took me in a windowless room. They showed me how to pick locks, how to open a padlock with a can of Coke, and then they showed me hacking a laptop that wasn't even turned on. And that was my second day with the company. And since that day, I think I found my calling. So, as I mentioned, my last talk contained a lot of war stories, stuff like this, which are always the fun bits. But importantly, they each contained a lesson learned, you know. And this one in particular was the company had spent time, money, investment on their perimeter security. And once we got inside, the entire company was on a flat network. So just like an outdated cyber security model, all the effort was on the perimeter. The reason I mention this is, as I say, there's red teaming's getting a little bit of a pasting post-COVID, and I've seen a lot of talks that have some really epic war stories, really cool gigs, but they're missing the lessons learned bit, and I think that's harming to the industry. You know, the talks are coming across that we're laughing at the customers about how easy these things are, which, to be fair, are very often very easy, but I think talking like this, it could potentially damage the industry that we care about. So I think it's our responsibility to use platforms such as this to try and educate. Would those people talk like that if all you were CISOs? I don't think they would. So, yeah, I've posted on LinkedIn about it, a bit of a rant that, you know, please don't forget the lessons learned. So the fear is real. As I say, post-COVID, even though we were working with our customers, we were fully deployed. Obviously, physical pen testing dropped off a cliff while the world was in lockdown. And we've got a handful of customers that their official reasoning for this is we saved all that budget for 3 years and we haven't been owned. So why should we? And, you know, I always say to them, you know, during physical pen tests, there was one we were on, and within 20 minutes, we found evidence of a real physical breach that they were completely unaware of. So how do they know they're not being owned if they're not testing? And these kind of conversations I was having 10 years ago, it got to the stage where I thought, right, everyone's understanding this, and then COVID happened, and it's like we've gone backwards. Again, I think a lot of businesses saved a lot of costs during COVID. I remember thinking during the pandemic that up until now, business sort of demonstrated growth by opening new offices and new locations. And I remember thinking during the pandemic, you know, they're going to realize they're saving multi-millions pounds. Are we going to see companies kind of shrink because they're making more money? And unfortunately, we've seen that. We've seen redundancies in this sector, which before COVID, they were quoting a 25-year skills gap. And with that, businesses, you know, if they haven't got to spend it, they really don't want to, like never before. So CISOs that I talk to are really disheveled. A lot of them have had a reduction in security budget. If they're lucky, they might have the same security budget. Even though threats are rising year on year, they're being asked, how can you make us more secure, but for no more money? And that's the challenge these people are having. So events, conferences, social media, I've seen just myths about red teaming that are simply untrue, which has really rattled me. I'll go into more detail because I've only got 20 minutes, but I don't think it's helpful. And when you've got a room full of CISOs nodding their head in agreement with these things that are just plain not right, I think, again, for the sector, that's really quite damaging, as I've just said. So the message that always gets forgotten is the whole aim of a reputable red team exercise is to make the organisation, its staff, and especially the blue team stronger. But it's just not painted like this. I don't know if you find the same. So I speak to a lot of CISOs every week, and I understand the stress that they're under when they're considering a red team exercise. Things like, will the red team get in? And at Kinetic, our red team, we've been red teaming for about 24 years. And on physical pen tests, we've never shown unwillingly a get out of jail free card. So the answer is highly likely, yes, we will. But it is a concern for them because it's their kingdom and they're employing world-class specialists to come and break into it. And I see a lot of resistance has crept back in when it seemed to be pre-COVID. Everyone was getting that red teaming is a good thing to do and the benefits from it. What about the victims? People are being referred to as victims now that fall for a phishing email. And how can we stop this? And should we make red teaming more like a weekly fire alarm? Because that's how you're going to get attacked, isn't it? At 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning every week. But these are the types of things being pushed out there, which, we are simulating attacks, how you would likely be attacked. And, the prime example that gets pushed out at a load of events is the West Midlands Rail phishing example, which you probably all know. But if not, it was a phishing exercise that West Midlands Rail emailed their staff and said, because you drove trains, that's right, isn't it? Because you drove your trains throughout the pandemic, here's a nice bonus for you. And of course, the success rate was sky high. The email looked legitimate because it was from their company. It got plastered all over the press on how not to fish. And obviously you've got ethical choices there and they shouldn't do it like that. And then on the other hand, would that be an impossible method for an attacker to take? Not really. But yeah, it's being portrayed as victims and trying to water red teams down. And I make a comparison that Kinetic are a defence company. Our biggest customer are the Ministry of Defence. And the MOD, the armed forces, when we're not at war, what do? They spend all their time exercising, preparing for war. And I think it's important that, the MOD trains like it fights. Let's exercise like we operate. And I've got a load of war stories when we've caught companies cheating their red teams, which again is another dangerous game. Will they access our business critical systems crown jewels? Almost surely. Yep. But these are all the fears going through a CISO's head when procuring a red team exercise. Will I need to include physical? I get this question so often. And as I said earlier, during a red team, we come across evidence of real breaches. And you could say that exercise is immediately paid for itself because that company didn't know it was happening. And the point I always make is, once our specialists are inside, we're simulating an insider threat, which is a top risk item. So, look at it that way. But I get that question all the time. Will my role be impacted if the red team is successful? I've actually seen the opposite, that when we red team, we have a small key stakeholder group, ideally, that knows the exercises going on. Rest of the business shouldn't know. But we've also accessed emails and found all staff emails saying, we're having a red team next week. But these people, we work closely with them. We keep them informed of each phase. And by the end of the exercise, they actually feel like the red team has been collaborative, and it's certainly not painted as that. It's offense versus defense, you against us. And by the end of the exercise, they can see the value of it, but it takes that one exercise sometimes. And if you're a CISO and you've run a red team and you've increased your resilience, you're going to end up more confident and more safe in your own job role, because we all know CISOs tend to have it's shockingly gone down to like 12, 18 months job expectancy or something silly like that. So if I was a CISO, I would want to know where my holes are, but a lot of them some are burying their heads in the sand, which again, you're waiting for something to happen. Will I lose face to my seniors? Again, when we red team, we often present to C-suite. But what we do, we assist with the findings. They remediate. And when we present it to the board, we show them what we did. And worryingly, you were here, but your team have fixed A, B, and C, and now you're up here. And it's a lot more positive. They end up getting security budget exactly where they need it. When you've gamed a red team, tipped off your entire organization, and the red team doesn't go, you might look good, but you're certainly not going to attract any further budget. So that's what I mean, that it's dangerous to game one. And we've seen members of blue teams gain a promotion after a single exercise because of how well they performed, and the presentation is being delivered directly at senior management. We've seen people get promoted, which is awesome. All these positives, which none of the industry is talking about. Will I feel a failure if the red team achieve their objectives? Again, hopefully with some of those examples at this point, the CISO's working with us. They can see that a red team is for good and not to be feared. Will my security budget be impacted? Very often they get more budget, surprisingly, because an independent company has come in and showed you exactly where your holes are. So if anything, all these CISOs at the moment that are crying out for investment actually get it off the back of a single exercise. And it's a bit of a tough sell, especially post-COVID, because we all know with pen testing, you've got check, crest, you're mandated to have an annual pen test. Red teaming's a little more Wild West. You've got things like CBEST and things like that. But it's kind of a nice to have. It's expensive because you're hiring, world-class operatives. It's for mature companies who care about their security. But again, without the mandation, we're in the year 2024 and this stuff's not mandated yet. If a company can save money, that's seemingly the choices they're making post-COVID. They're losing the fact that a single breach could end an entire organization, just mentioning how collaborative a red team exercise ends up being. And again, it's not painted like this. Realizing I'm short on time. I would like a call to arms with all you security professionals. Red teaming is getting a right hammering. Press, events. Some of the security influencers on LinkedIn are peddling questionable quotes, and then everybody's agreeing with them apart from me. But I'm asking you, red team, let's use our powers for good and start spreading these messages wherever you can, whether that be with your own customers who are literally doing the bare minimum, an annual pen test, posting about it online. Please. It's like a comic relief appeal or something, this, isn't it? Yeah. Please. A company's just been owned. No. But no, in all seriousness, wherever possible, please, talk about red teaming. I've got a couple of minutes left. Again, thank you very much for your time. If there's any questions, slightly different talk to my usual one. But thank you for your time, and thank you, B-Sides, for putting me on. Oh, Gaza. I actually do both. So the last engagement, I sold it to them, and then I delivered it, which was the last thing they were expecting, which is pretty cool. But yeah, my aspiration is to move across 100% full-time physical pen testing. And that's why I'm passionate that people are not understanding the value of red teaming. Even though we have a large customer base, and as I say, we work with them throughout COVID. Some of the thought processes just gone back 10 years of it hasn't happened to us yet. It's like burglar alarm syndrome. Your house gets burgled and then you put the alarm up. It's just that. Cheers. Yeah, I mean, I see companies operating physical and information security separately, siloed, with a massive gap in the middle. And as I say, once we're inside, it's then a cybersecurity problem. It's frustrating, and I see this as well with businesses that share an office block. There's a third-party security company, and there's 12 businesses in there. But has anybody tested your physical security? No, we just pay them a monthly fee and that's it, and not one of those businesses will take accountability to test that third party. But information sharing, there's been a number of things in the past where they've tried to make people more open and things, and I think they start off with a flourish and then sort of die down. But with physical, we're seeing news headlines now that this isn't just a cyber risk or information security risk. There's physical stuff going on, which is personal harm, and the kind of times we're in at the moment, that's kind of increasing, So physical security should be, a top board level priority. And it should be a cultural thing. And the staff should be educated about it. Thank you. Hey. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Can you get someone to dip in and out of different bits of it, throughout the year without saying, "Oh, well, you've got 3 days here and 3 days there." Yeah. Yeah. And then build a relationship with the supplier that understands the business that knows you want to do it that way. Sure. The industry is very stuck in this sort of day rate. Yeah. Partly because there's a lot of firms out there who are just winning the business and then procuring it via a contractor, and they've got to pay them a day rate. And you've got in-house people, you've got the power to be more flexible. Yeah, definitely. That's interesting. A couple of points regarding that is, so when we're red teaming and say it's a full spectrum red team, black box, including recon, physical. If we achieve any objectives in the time frame sooner than we expect, we are straight in contact with our key point of contact and we bring the next phase forward. So we give maximum value. We don't just go, oh, we've done that, and sit there for 4 days, burning your budget, So that's something we do. Some companies, it is a real close relationship during the exercise. We might do breach acceptance somewhere, and work on what their bad day really looks like. Again, to give value for money. Second point is, we've just partnered with a company called Inspire. They're another defense company. They provide training. And the aim is to provide a more continuous service. And the idea is Inspire pick up some of the stuff that the expensive red team guys don't need to do, which then brings the overall cost down, and you could do things more regularly. So if you run a red team exercise now, like a 60-day engagement, you might see that customer this time next year, and then the 11 months in between, nothing happens. With this model, you run an engagement. The red team's only deployed on the offensive parts and the OSINT, obviously. Then Inspire, judging by the outcomes, may provide training. Then there might be an exercise 2, which might be, a shortened version, but has the remediation or the training been effective? And you've got this more continual model rather than a project-led delivery of, oh, we've delivered this, they've got the report, and see you again in 12 months, which I think, we've only just announced it at Cyber UK, but I think it's a good way forward for more regular involvement while you haven't got bottomless pockets, while keeping costs under control. So. Yeah, and a lot of our red team guys end up good pals with blue teams, on that very basis. It's a very sort of pick up the phone kind of relationship. We're vendor agnostic. We don't sell certain products or anything like that, but we get a lot of blue teams ringing us up saying, we're thinking of installing this. What do you think? And we're kind of like, that does give us some hassle on red team engagements. Go for it. Or, have you thought of these instead? They're pretty good, so we keep that kind of independent, impartial, relationship with our customers because, we're not signed up to sell product or tin or any silver bullets. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, and that's where the critical gap is. Those teams should ideally work closely together, because as I say, once you've physically breached a premises, it turns into a cybersecurity problem. And we see them operating completely siloed, no communication. If you breach one, you're straight into the other. So that is, in the year 2024, very much still happening. There's just a guy there. Yeah, so reporting physical breaches to the company. Again, it's like educational and improving the culture. Nowhere's 100% secure. That's just the way it is. But our culture at Kinetic is, if we see our CEO, for instance, and we know he's our CEO, but he's not wearing his pass, I will go up to him and say, where's your pass? And it's that kind of mindset. You need to make your staff responsible enough to challenge people, challenge culture, because most of the places I get into is just by really kind people who shouldn't be letting me in. And yeah, exactly. And that's the point where I get serious guilt when, please stop helping me. But I overcome that by thinking, at least it's me getting in and not somebody for real. So that's how I quickly get over it. But yeah, it's improving the culture of all the employees, making them feel responsible, because it is their responsibility. Perfect. Yeah. And it again, slightly on a tangent, COVID changing the world and hybrid working now, people working from home. Security is a given at work, but how many companies are sending out instructions to change the default password on your router? As your printer patched up, are you shredding any documents that you print? There's not many companies that are joining the dots, and it's still the same risks, if not more, because you're in your home environment. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. But yeah, thank you. I'm going to let you go and enjoy some fine beer. All right.